Well, welcome to the St. Mary's Farm. If you haven't been welcomed before now, welcome. If you have, welcome again. It's good to have you all here. I always say that we look forward to this day every year. It's a lot of work for our staff, but we're always so happy to share this farm with all of you. And I love the teamwork that goes into the YL family. You need us to do what you do, and we need you to do what we do. So it's a great partnership, I believe. So my name is Jacqueline Sagers, and my husband Kevin and I manage this farm. This is our 6th season here. I serve as the office manager and the human resources representative for both Idaho farms. So I get to work closely with the St. Mary's crew as well as the Highland Flats crew, if any of you are familiar with that farm. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about St. Mary's Lavender. Jared touched on a little bit of it when he was giving you his welcome speech, and then Mary, of course, shared some of the history of this farm. And it seems to be very emotional right now. She was emotional, I'm feeling emotional, so if I get a little bit sappy on you, just forgive me, but I'm still getting used to as well referring to Gary in the past tense. I give a lot of farm tours on this farm throughout the year, and I keep finding myself having to remind myself that we're past tensing some of the references, so just bear with me if you would. I appreciate that courtesy. So have any of you heard, beyond what Jared shared today, have you heard the story of St. Mary's Lavender? Okay, great. Well, I'll give you a Reader's Condensed version, but before I get to that, as I was mentioning with our crew here, I want to introduce a couple of our team members. Back here behind me is Sarah Shaw. Sarah is our groundskeeper, so everything that you see here that's in a pot or has been mowed or groomed or something, Sarah's responsible for that. Either she did it or had someone do it, so she does an amazing job. Yep, it's a big undertaking, and Sarah's here with us year-round, so in the winter, she helps us with all sorts of different projects and activities outside of just when we can be out on the ground, so we're very grateful for her. The other lovely lady here is Jeannie Maddox, and Jeannie joined us as one of our summer hires. She's continuing her education and is going to be leaving us to go back to school. We're super sad for us, but we're very happy for her. But she's been an amazing asset this season, so I'm really grateful for Sarah and Jeannie having them here with us, and they're going to be helping me with a bit of a treat that we have for all of you, and I'll get to that in a minute. So the St. Mary's Lavender story. When Gary first started his research with essential oils, he started with lavender. So we've heard some of that today. And there are 14 species of lavender to the best of my knowledge. There may be more out there, but that's what I know about. And Young Living supports one species. It is Lavandula augustifolia, also known as true lavender. And those buds can be any color from the deep purple that you imagine to the lighter lavender shades, all the way to white. I've yet to see any white out in our fields, but I have seen as light as pink. The Lavandula augustifolia is the same lavender that is grown on the farm in Mona, Utah, and the farm in Provence, France. So that is the type that we support. And it may look a bit different if you visit the other farms due to different environmental variables, but it is the same species of plant. So when Gary started his research, he decided that he'd better talk to some people that knew something about this lavender. So he contacted both a farmer and a distiller in the region of Provence, France. Now, Provence is the largest lavender producing region in the world. It's mostly used for perfume products, but nonetheless, that's where Gary ended up, and he made many trips over to that area to study with that farmer and that distiller. And every time he came back here to the States, he would smuggle those seeds. And as Jared mentioned, he did. He had a pair of cowboy boots that in the heel, he could stash some seeds. And he told me that he'd also stash them in the band of his cowboy hat. So after several trips, he had enough seeds to plant 40 acres. And Jared mentioned that he started with 1/4 or 1/8 of an acre in Spokane, and then eventually had 40 acres in lavender here on this farm. And then it's grown since then, and then we've also decreased the lavender since then. We have the least amount of lavender right now than we've ever had, and that's because we've been giving more and more of our acreage over to Melissa. We're the largest Melissa farm for Young Living, so a lot of our acreage has been given to that crop, because the lavender grows very well in Utah and also in France. So in about 2011, Gary received a phone call from the farm in France and said, "Gary, help, the lavender's dying here. And it's not just our farm, it's in this whole region. We don't know what to do." Well, after some research and some studying, they found that there were 3 things happening. There was a virus, a fungus, and a drought that was attacking the lavender all at the same time. So it was very decimating to those fields. So Gary came here to the St. Mary's farm and collected some seeds, took them over to the farm in France, and we replanted them, and those plants to this day are doing very well. So the St. Mary's lavender has literally made a full life circle to be returned back to where it all started. On this farm, with it being the very first farm, It was purchased in 1992, so even prior to Young Living Company being formed, which was formed in 94. So Gary purchased this in 92, started farming it in 93. And so it's really important for us here on this first farm to hold on to the history, to be a kind of a timekeeper, if you will, of different journeys and adventures and processes that have happened on this farm and throughout the Young Living Company. This farm is also a research farm. With this being the first farm that Gary had, you can imagine he tried out all sorts of different things, from crops that Mary talked about, to different types of distillation practices, to different types of harvest practices. And so we're really happy to be able to hold on to that history and to stay true to the beginnings of this company. That's really valuable to all of us. I want to point out this red tractor over here to my right. This is our lavender harvester. It looks like a good old antique. Well, it somewhat is, but it is our active lavender harvester. We just had this out in these fields in the last 2 weeks when we were finishing up the lavender harvest. This was purchased and brought over from France, and then we've had a replica made that I believe is now on the Mona farm that helps to harvest their lavender plants. These tractors over here to my left, these are here just as a visual example for all of you of some of the different machinery and equipment that we use in the fields. We're able to attach many different implements on either one of those tractors to do many different jobs. But the lavender harvester is truly just that. We use it specifically for the lavender, and that's the only function that it has, but it's a very important function. So I love to turn the time over right about now, before I tell you your special treat and turn you all loose, is if there are questions that you all have. We just had some wonderful information shared from Jared and Mary and Josh and some of other folks. And if you have questions for me, I'm very happy to answer them.
Total acreage here?
200 acres.
Where's the is there bottling done here?
No, we used to do the bottling here. We could bottle it here and label it and ship it right to your homes. But because of our growth, everything goes to the distribution centers now for inventory purposes.
So it goes in big vats?
Yep, stainless steel containers. They're weighed and documented and sealed, and then we ship them in-house, meaning by staff, down to the distribution center in Spanish Fork.
Wow.
Yeah. So we keep records of all of the different fields. We actually have some aerial maps, and each field has a name or a label. And then we track those with records after we harvest. Of when a plant starts to decline, we can look back on the records of, oh, it's this old. An aromatic plant for good oil production is typically 8 to 10 years old. That can vary, but that's just a generalization. So if we start seeing that the oil amount is decreasing, or even a visual check, you know, sometimes the plants just start to look a little bit sad, and we can pull those records and determine if it's time to rotate that crop out.
Is there a difference between the colors of the lavender? You said it went from dark purple, like in the constituency?
No, that's just one of the properties of that particular species, the Lavandula augustifolia, or true lavender. Yeah. Yes, we do soil sample testing throughout the year on this farm, as well as tissue of the plants. We sample that in our water. So if we determine that a field is missing something and we're going to rotate that crop, we will plant a cover crop that has something to it that will replace something that the soil sample test is saying is missing. An example is the field across the road. I'm sure many of you noticed the baby lavender plants. We just rotated that crop out and replanted those. That soil was greatly in need of nitrogen, so one of the cover crops we used was something that had a high component of nitrogen, and when we plowed it in the next year, it replenished some of our need.
What was it you planted?
That particular one was ryegrass. But we use many other types as well, depending on what the field is saying it needs. This farm, we call them microclimates. So you can imagine sun exposure, drainage, you know, the different things. Mary talked how the peppermint didn't do well in this, you know, zone where it kind of scoops down in there. So we keep track of all of those different things because there's a lot of different needs, even though we're on the same farm.
How many bushels or pounds of lavender does it take to make a bottle?
To make a bottle, that's a good question. And I don't have a direct answer because it varies every year depending on our crop. That we've yet to find this magical number that says, oh, X amount equals a bottle.
Is there a range?
No, not a safe one I could give you. When you go down to the distillery, are you headed there? No, you're not headed there. Okay, so did Cody talk about on that deck how much plant material it took to fill one cooker? And did they just refer to Melissa on that measurement? Okay, so lavender, it doesn't take as much lavender as it does the Melissa, and we get a lot more lavender oil than we do the Melissa, like 6 times the amount per cook. So I realize that's not an exact number, but that gives you a little bit greater of a comparison.
One less than 1,000.
I love that. More than one, less than 1,000. Yes.